Because granted, as a black man, you know, we've lost people. I mean, black people, we know what it's like to lose people. I mean, we lost people to slavery, we lost people to lynching, Jim Crow, and all of these other things. But I can't imagine what it was like to be black and gay. I imagine it's not easy. I imagine it's difficult. And just watching that episode of Unsung and seeing what Sylvester went through from the time he was molested till the time he realized that his time was coming to an end here on Earth, it's hard, man. It's difficult to watch, but it's a necessary watch. It gives you, if you have any sort of heart, if you have any sort of soul, it gives you a level of empathy towards somebody who is very much different from you. Everybody, you're right on time for another ride on the Groove Line with your host Chris Stevens. This is day number 16. We are in the second half now. Day number 16 of the BMM 30 series. If this is your first time on the train, the Groove Line is a music podcast, and BMM 30 means June is Black Music Month. So for 30 days, there'll be an episode about an artist, a group, a band, a producer, an album, a song, a sound, an era, a genre, a region, you name it, we got it covered. So be sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell to be notified of all the new content that drops on this channel. And don't forget to like and comment on the videos. We have good conversations in the comments. And the more likes and comments these videos get, the more eyes and ears can be on this channel. So thank you all for coming on the ride. Greatly appreciate you. Not only is June Black Music Month, but it's also Pride Month. And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the positive impact our LGBTQ brothers and sisters have had on the music realm. And today I want to talk about Sylvester. Sylvester is, of course, known as the Queen of Disco. And even though he's a guy, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. Sylvester's impact on the world of music and the LGBTQ community can't be understated. To give you a brief background on Sylvester, he was born in Los Angeles in 1947 to a single mother. Actually, his mom wasn't single at the time, but his father ended up abandoning the group of kids and his mother Letha really young. Ended up marrying another man who didn't agree with Sylvester's, they would call it a lifestyle now, but I don't know if you can call, sexual orientation a lifestyle now. I don't think we call it that anymore. But Sylvester's stepfather didn't agree with his lifestyle or his orientation. So he left the house very young. And it's also important to note that this is in Sylvester's biography that he was molested by a person of the church when he was really, really young. I think they said 8 or 9 years old in the biography. And instead of taking that person who that man who molested Sylvester, the church turned their back on him. So he was like, imagine being molested in grade school, and then by the time you get to junior high and high school, feeling like that you don't have any sort of back people backing you up or anything, or anybody that has your back because you're just a little different. So by the time he was 15, 16 years old, he was out on the streets. He would end up staying with his grandmother and other relatives from time to time who didn't mind that he was gay. So he fell in with a group of cross-dressers called the Discotheques. Now, mind you, this is what LGBTQ folks have been fighting for so long, to just be recognized in public and not be bothered. Because back in the 60s in Los Angeles, you could be arrested for cross-dressing or dressing in drag. They called it masquerading. So even though trans people, lesbians, gay guys, non-binary folks have been around forever, there were laws that said they could not be themselves. That's what these fools in office now want to bring back. We already know about the racial aspect, the ethnic cleansing and all of that Nazi BS. They're also waging an active war against the LGBTQ community as well. So we can't leave those folks out in the struggle. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But Sylvester had found his tribe at that point in time. And they started to drift apart by the end of the 60s. So by 1970, Sylvester ends up in San Francisco and joins a drag troupe called the Cockettes. And they were inspired by, blues musicians like Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald, and even people like Sister Rosetta Tharpe and all of those folks. And Sylvester's voice blew people away. So he ends up leaving the Cockettes and forms a rock band called Sylvester and His Hot Band, but that didn't work very well because the sounds just clashed too differently. I mean, you had this big church-based voice with heavy metal, and they just didn't work well together. And in fact, guys in the group said Sylvester was hard to work with. I think that's where things get lost in translation, because Sylvester was a perfectionist, but he was working with straight white dudes, and I don't think straight white dudes could really understand what a gay black dude in early 70s San Francisco was going through. So the hot band, that falls apart, and then Sylvester, goes solo, for lack of a better word, even though he does end up with a touring band. But he did find two background singers, Martha Wash, who, oh my God, Martha Wash, one of the greatest voices ever, and one of the unsung voices ever. I mean, if you haven't watched her unsung, how the dance music folks of the 90s robbed her blind, you should definitely watch that. And Azora Rhodes and Jeannie Tracy, but it was Martha and Azora who would become Two Tons of Fun, Sylvester's background singers, and they would of course become the Weather Girls, better known for It's Raining Men. So 78, 79 is when Sylvester really finds a niche in disco. He has Dance Disco Heat, and of course, You Make Me Feel Mighty Real, which of course is in the Library of Congress, is one of the most important recordings in American history. So it's crazy to think that this dude kind of sort of he rose from obscurity. I mean, this was a young man who had been kicked out of his house for being gay. He found a group of, gay men, cross-dressers, and trans women who he identified with, then moved to San Francisco and just became the toast of the town. Remember when I said there was somebody that outsung Patti LaBelle with You Are My Friend? It's Sylvester, because Sylvester had his own day in San Francisco. Like, Sylvester got the key to the city, and he sang You Are My Friend. And if you've not listened to that live recording, it is like church. It is absolutely like church. And you listen to it and it's like, wow. Like, that's why Patti LaBelle has such a huge, gay following. It's because of Sylvester. And, Sylvester, his version of You Are My Friend, everybody went back to look at Patti and was like, wow, we have our guiding light now. So, and I always thought it was neat, that Patti went to go kick it with Sylvester in his final days. Like, Patti LaBelle was, just a great spirit. I mean, she went to go, hang out with Sylvester in his final days, and that really just lifted his spirits, even though he knew he was dying at the time. So shouts out to Patti LaBelle for that, a real one. But the good days would not be long for Sylvester, because he was working with Fantasy Records at the time, that was run by Harvey Fuqua, who of course discovered Marvin Gaye. And Harvey was kind of sort of robbing everybody blind on Fantasy Records. And Sylvester and the Two Tons were like, this is some bullshit. We out. Of course, Sylvester and the Two Tons left, but the Two Tons ended up being soothed by Harvey. Said, no, I can give you a record deal solo. I can give you girls a deal as a group. We'll rename you the Weather Girls, and we'll give you a song called It's Raining Men. And that was a point of consternation for Sylvester for a very long time. And so he went solo again, super solo, signed with Patrick Cowley's Megatone Records. And of course, Patrick Cowley is the beat behind Do You Wanna Funk, which is probably Sylvester's, I don't know if I'd call it his legend song, because of course You Make Me Feel Mighty Real has been preserved by the Library of Congress. It doesn't get much bigger than that. But I feel like Do You Wanna Funk is sort of like disco's last gasp, even though it's considered a high energy record. Because when you think about 1982, everyone had sort of gone their own way after Disco Demolition Night. Disco Demolition Night becomes electro and boogie, and house hadn't become a thing as of yet. It was on the way. But Hi-NRG was sort of like that middle ground between disco, electro, boogie, house music. So Do You Wanna Funk is just one of those records that lives up to the name. It is truly high energy. You gotta listen to the 12-inch version, though. I mean, the 3-minute version, the single version ain't bad, but the 6 damn near 7-minute version is one of my favorites on my running playlist. When I go for I have electro playlist that I use for Saturday mornings, and just to get me in the mood to run on a Saturday morning, because actually I just want to lay in bed all day Saturday. But if I go run on Saturday mornings, I find that my weekend goes better. And I have an electro playlist for songs from the early 80s and R&B, hip hop, rap, and all of that stuff. And Do You Want to Funk is one of the highlights of that playlist. So it was a great song. But again, this is the early 80s, and people are starting to, gay men are starting to drop like flies because of this new disease that just bam. And it was eventually called gay, it was GRID. It was GRID. I can't remember what the R is for, but it's gay R immune deficiency syndrome. And of course, it would eventually become HIV and AIDS later on in the decade. But and even, it affected Sylvester right off the rip, because as Do You Want to Funk was racing up the dance charts, Patrick Cowley died of AIDS in November of 82. So, I mean, it was already starting. And it became such a huge endemic type of thing that it became the gay disease, for lack of a better word. Then we found out that, of course, you can acquire it through, sharing needles and eventually heterosexual sex. I mean, Magic Johnson ended up getting HIV, for crying out loud. So the second half of Sylvester's career after, Dance Disco Heat and You Make Me Feel Mighty Real is just like watching friends and lovers die while trying to stay on the charts. And it didn't work out very well because he was, notoriously hard to work with, even though I just find that to be a little bit difficult. I just think that people just didn't understand, what Sylvester was going through and how, he was trying to cope in some ways. But his partner, the one that he thought was the love of his life, ended up dying in 87. And it was just like, okay, Sylvester, you're next. I mean, it just felt like he held it off for as long as he could, just, and not making any pronouncements or anything, announcements of that nature. But it was just too close to home for him. And of course, there's the tragic image of him, being, wheeled in a chair during Gay Pride and AIDS awareness parade in San Francisco, looking like a shell of his former self. And it was hard. I mean, that Unsung episode, I mean, Sylvester's Unsung is still one of my very favorites in the series, because it makes you look at the, what people go through up close and personal. Like, you can't hide your face from it. You can't hide behind it, even though, as a straight guy, it doesn't you would argue it doesn't concern you, but as a human being watching somebody go through that, like, I never forget. I think I want to attribute this correctly. I do believe it was the great music critic Craig Seymour who said that, gay people that lived through gay men that lived through HIV and AIDS, that's why they're so rigid and hard right now, because they lost a lot of their elders. And they're like, we are the elders now. When I saw that, I was like, shit, that hits hard. Because granted, as a black man, we've lost people. I mean, black people, we know what it's like to lose people. I mean, we lost people to slavery. We lost people to lynching, Jim Crow, and all of these other things. But I can't imagine what it was like to be black and gay. I imagine it's not easy. I imagine it's difficult. And just watching that episode of Unsung and seeing what Sylvester went through from the time he was molested till the time he realized that his time was coming to an end here on Earth, it's hard, man. It's difficult to watch, but it's a necessary watch. It gives you, if you have any sort of heart, if you have any sort of soul, it gives you a level of empathy towards somebody who is very much different from you. And that's what I took from that episode. That's what I take from everything that I read about Sylvester, that I listen to about Sylvester. And he died a little while after his birthday, actually, a couple of weeks after his birthday. He turned 41 on December 6th, and I think he died like a week or so later, something like that. So he had one last birthday, and then, he was gone. But his legacy as somebody who was a trailblazer, and the fact, of that gender bending mentality, that androgyny that people like Gaga enjoy now, that people like Sam Smith enjoy now, that even people like Boy George and George Michael back then sort of drew off an inspiration from Sylvester. So Sylvester was a trendsetter in many ways, not just with the music, but with presentation, with being out and proud about being a gay man, in the music industry. So I hope that we continue to remember Sylvester for just what he was able to accomplish in the short 41 years, even though the odds were stacked against him from the start. I mean, you grow up in as a boomer, a gay kid who is ostracized by his family and his church. Then he finds his tribe, his circle. Then he has a few hits, and then the music industry chews him up and spits him out because, again, he's a gay man. And by the time the 80s come around, there's HIV and AIDS, and he's watching Friends, he's watching Lovers, he's watching Loved Ones, and then of course, the Reaper comes for him. Very difficult, man. Very difficult. It's a tragic story, but it's also some bright lights in it. And I hope people learn more about Sylvester and learn more about what our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are going through, because they deserve respect. They deserve dignity. They deserve as much. They deserve the right to exist peacefully just as much as us straight folks do. And, just listen to some Sylvester. Like I said, one of my favorite ballads. I mean, I talk about Do You Want to Funk, but one of my favorite love songs of the early 80s is Can't Forget the Love. Like, if you need to listen to Sylvester in a torch song kind of setting, listen to Can't Forget the Love. It's one of the best songs of that early 80s period, for crate diggers and dusty grooves type of people, because it wasn't going to get played on the radio, because who wanted to hear about a gay man singing to another gay man talking about, and I can't forget the love. Like, I can't sing. I can't sing like Sylvester, but I promise you, Can't Forget the Love. Go listen to it by Sylvester. You'll be glad you did. Just listen to a lot of Sylvester. Go read the biography, The Fabulous Sylvester. I mean, there's been plays about him. There's been documentaries about him that you can find. And you'll find that this was a complicated human being who gave his heart and soul to the music industry and his community. And he should never be forgotten. And that's going to do it for day 16 of the BMM 30 series here on the Groove Line. Greatly appreciate y'all for coming along for the ride. Contact information will be in the description below. We come back tomorrow for more. So 16 days down, 14 to go, 2 weeks left. Hope you guys are ready. So thanks for coming along for the ride. Until the next time we ride, y'all be good or be good at it.